Good afternoon and welcome to our program, which is being presented at the Holiday Inn in Hays, Kansas on October 19, 1991 for the roundup of the Kansas AHSGR chapters. Before we start our performance, I am going to offer a few explanations to avoid any misunderstandings. Many of you are Germans from Russia and therefore share traditions and dialects with us. However, even though we share a common background, we may differ somewhat in minor details. The traditions of the Volga German Catholics, for example, differ with those of the Volga German Lutherans, the Odessa Germans, or other Germans from Russia. Time prevents us from recalling even all of the Ellis County traditions. So, if, as you watch our performance, you say to yourself, "That is not the way I remember it," or "They omitted die chivarerer," bear in mind that we are aware of these differences and omissions. We are reenacting a wedding, as it might have taken place in Munjor, Kansas, in 1881, when Johannes Schumacher and Maria Dechant were married. The German you hear is Ellis County Volga German, primarily the Munjor and Tchenchen dialects, but also some Victoria and Catherine German. In the late 18th century, the 7 Years' War left Germany devastated and in shambles. The primary victims were the common people, the farmers and peasants.
But the suffering was not confined only to these unfortunates, but also touched the nobility and the upper class. Higher taxes and additional sacrifices brought greater poverty and misery, which ultimately resulted in unbearable discontent and dissatisfaction, until escape from their homeland seemed to be the only solution to their problems. At the same time, Catherine the Great, the Tsarina of Russia, was very interested in settling some of her huge, sparsely settled area. Foreign immigration, especially by her countrymen, seemed to be the solution to the problem. In 1763, she issued a manifesto in which she promised the discontented colonists so many privileges that the Germans could not resist her invitation to immigrate to Russia, and many undertook the move. However, from the moment of their departure from Germany, they were beset with problems and broken promises. So the journey to paradise turned into a nightmare. But they survived numerous disappointments and reversals, and in time became prosperous and lived in contentment for 100 years before they suffered another serious setback. In 1874, when a decree mandating military service for every colonist's son of military age was issued, the Germans again sought a better life elsewhere, this time in America. In 1876 and 1877, numerous groups came to Ellis and Rush counties, where they founded Liebenthal, Katharienstadt, Herzog, Obermunjor, Pfeiffer, and Tchenchen. They brought with them their religious beliefs, the German language, their music, songs, customs, and traditions. For many years, actually until the end of World War II, they resided in these villages or on farms, had very little contact with the English-speaking people in the county, and sent their children to the village school where they learned German as well as English. During World War II, however, during World War I, the teaching of German in the schools was prohibited. But other than that, the Volga Germans were not greatly affected. After World War II, however, the Volga Germans' acceptance of progress and a changing lifestyle, including more numerous business as well as social contacts with their English-speaking neighbors, resulted in an almost total loss of their customs and traditions. And unfortunately, as a result, very few are observed today, and in the very near future, even these few will be remembered only through pictures, books, records, and videos. In an attempt to preserve this colorful heritage for future generations, the program which you are about to see is being videotaped. The most colorful customs, and those which have survived the longest, are the wedding customs. The early settlers came from different villages on the Volga, but their customs and traditions were, with some minor variations, basically the same. This afternoon, we are going to reenact the wedding of Johannes Schumacher and Maria Dechant as it might have taken place in Munjor, Kansas in 1881. Until perhaps several generations ago, most courtships involved young people from the same village, and it was not advisable for a young man to seek a bride in a community other than his own. Any young man with the audacity to court a girl from another village risked harassment from the young men who looked upon him as competition. Subtle, and sometimes not so subtle means were used to show their displeasure. For example, there is the true story, the incident of a young man from Lorene who rode his horse to Pfeiffer to court a young lady. When he left her house later in the evening for the ride home, he found that his horse had been replaced with a cow. This was one of the more subtle hints. Now, here we see two upstanding Shenchen men discussing, the weather and the crops and whatever, when they noticed the presence of a stranger.
Nå, was ist dein Name? Wo kommst du her?
Ik woon in Munjor.
Munjor? Aber Munjor?
Ja.
Was willst du?
Ik wil heiraten en ik zoek een bruid. Ik heb gehoord er waren schöne Mädchen in Shinche.
Ja, das ist wahr. Maar nicht aber die schöne Mädchen sein für die schönere Jungen. Das nicht für die Munjor.
Dechant, wo du gekommen bist, dran. Und sucht der Ahne. In Munjor. Dechant.
This was the not so subtle message. And for those of you that don't understand the German, there were these two fine men from Shenzhen, and they saw the stranger from Munjor. And when he told them that he heard there were some nice girls in Shenzhen and he was looking for a bride, they immediately sent him on his way. Our groom follows tradition and seeks his bride at home in Munjor. Today's weddings are usually the climax of a courtship and probably an engagement period. But courtship, as we know it today, was almost unknown by unser Leid in 1881. Instead of popping the question herself, instead of popping the question himself, the groom-to-be selected two elderly friends of the family, deemed to possess the wisdom and maturity for a tactful presentation, and they were to make the proposal for him. On the designated evening, the groom and his Friarsmänner would visit the home of the prospective bride and her family. Once there, the groom usually sat very quietly or remained outside to await the verdict. At any rate, he did not let the girl know that he was very interested in her. That was up to the Friarsmänner. We're going to ask you at this point to stretch your imagination a little bit, not only right here, but also in a number of acts in the future. But we want you to look at this scene and visualize it as a home in 1881 in Munjor. That is the home of Karl Dechant. We couldn't set up everything exactly as the home, but I think you get the general picture. And in the kitchen, by the way, there were usually 2 rooms. That was a kitchen and a bedroom. And the kitchen served as a combination kitchen, dining room, living room, and whatever else. But in this particular kitchen now, nothing out of the ordinary is noted. Take a look at them. There's nothing really out of the ordinary. Mother is patching or crocheting. Usually the families were large enough to where mother always had enough of this type of work. The young daughter, probably unaware of the decision she must make tonight, busies herself with fancy work for her hope chest. Oh, father is relaxing after a long day's work. He might be praying the rosary, or he might be reading the Bible or some other holy book. And then there are the grandparents. They're very content just to be with children and grandchildren.
Johannes, du hast dich so schön an, was gibt's an Abend?
Vette Paul und vette Jakob, ich bin 21 Jahre alt und ich denke, dass ich alt genug zu heiraten. Was denkst du an?
Na ja, du bist groß und stark und schaffst hart. Du bist alt genug. Du hast für so eine Mädchen ausgesucht?
Ja, die Dechants Karl hat ein schöner. Die Maria gefällt mir.
Das ist ein schönes Mädchen.
Ja, da besser du mal gleich mal hin bei den Karl und sehen, was wir aus können machen.
Komm, wir ziehen uns an und gehen wir mal und plaudern mit denen.
Now, again, for those of you that don't understand the German, these 2 fine, upstanding relatives of the young groom were approached by the groom, and he tells them that he is ready to get married. He is 21 years old. He thinks that's old enough to get married. What do they think? And they agree. One of them says, "You're big, you're strong, you can work hard. I think it's a good idea you should get married. Now, have you selected a girl? Have you picked one out?" And the groom says, "Yeah, Karl Dechant over there. He's got one that I kind of like. I think maybe I would like to ask her to get married." Now, of course, the bride may know, she may have an inkling about this, and then again, she may not. There are incidents in Ellis County where a bride was totally surprised and didn't know that she was going to get married until the Friarsmen arrived and all of the arrangements had been made, and then she realized she was a bride. So like I say, in this home tonight, the bride may have some suspicion, and then again, she may not. But anyway, they decide that they're going to get dressed properly now, and they're going to go pay this Karl Dechant a visit. And the next scene that you see will be the so-called Friarsmänner. That is the matchmakers, the baptismal sponsors, the people that really know the groom and they can speak well for him. When they come to the home of the bride, they're going to really have to do their level best. They're going to have to do some fast talking. Generally, they start out rather slowly. The weather, the crops, or whatever. And then they work up to it. And it gets better and better as time goes on until the father finally decides he'd better ask his daughter to see whether she wants to marry him. The following scene now could be one that takes place at the home of Karl Dechant.
Es ist ja so spät, ich muss bei das ist. Na Paul, Was bringt euch raus heute oben? Es ist ja so spät.
Ach, das ist so spät. Ja, das ist...
Warte mal, komm rein, setzt euch doch. Wer ist der junge Kerl da?
Ja, das ist Schumachers Peders son Hannes.
Na, setzt euch mal, setzt.
Das da, das ist ein Wasinger für den.
Den Wasinger kenne ich, den
Ja,
habe ich schon lange
ja.
kennt. Hey, wollt mal was trinken?
Ja.
Gut. Setzt euch hier.
Hier mal ans trinken.
Den habe ich erst letzte Woche gemacht. Das ist frisch, aber gut.
Das lijkt net zo goed, wenn die onder sugar
Hey, Wasinger, wir fangen mit den alten Leuten an, gell?
Nicht so viel,
Das ist gut, trinken.
ja, Gesundheit.
Okay, das geht gut, gell?
Du musst ihn gut gemacht haben.
Oh ja.
Je sagt richtig gute Schnaps.
Na drauf. Nur mit die Arme wollen auch da ein bisschen.
So,
Der Großvater, der will auch.
aha, schmeckt aber gut.
Ja, das haben wir das gleich.
Ah, das ist gut.
Das wusste er gar nicht, gell? Den muss ich verstecken, wenn der rum ist, der gleicht die Bottle ab. Ja, ich denke auch. Nicht so viel. Ich hatte ja schon gerade ein paar Minuten zu reden. Da was meint
Ja,
euch?
sag mal, richtig schöner Tag.
Das war die Scheinheit, aber je Gott gestern war so heiß. Die Geil, die geschwitzt da draußen im Feld, die kann der Ball nicht mehr.
Sagt Rupert.
Der sagt drüber, ja, hey, Leid, ich muss gerade vorhin in den Rosenkranz gebeten. Als es Regen soll geben, schon 3 Monate hat es nicht geregnet. Und Leid, da ihr Bett nicht genommen.
Ja, ja, nicht beide. Nicht beide. Immer
Gebt noch nicht auf.
jeden Tag beide wieder. Nicht?
Aber was ich sagen kann, es ist ein Tag dichter. Es gibt heute Regen. Na, was bringt euch da raus?
Ja, der Hannes da, der jetzt gern heiraten. Und hat die Maria in sich.
Na, ja. Guck mal da. Die ist nicht mehr so jung, wie sie war. Die gibt alt. Die muss Hilfe haben. Die Maria muss daheim bleiben. Ja, wenn die heiratet, muss ich vielleicht das Geschirr wäschen. Ich will nicht da.
Ja, warte mal. Der kann die Maria nicht immer behalten. Die Zeit kommt, wo der Gefängnis
Ja,
läuft.
das wissen wir ja, aber nicht.
Aber er hat eine gute Gelegenheit, ein richtig guter junger Mann zu kriegen.
Das glaube ich ja auch. Na.
Was sagst du dann, Jakob?
Wel, denn sein Vater ist ein reicher Mann. Und er kriegt ein fettes Land. Und er hat so ein paar Kühe. Und hat 10 Hinkel und Giggel. Ja, der Schaft hat. Und der Schaft Betrieb hat.
Vaterland.
Fettes Land, ja.
Hier.
Und Kühe, ja.
Warte mal, wir sind da.
Ja. Ach, 2 Zeit.
Ach, 2 Steine.
2 Zeit.
Was sagt dann der Großvater?
Hat wohl geholfen.
Ich denke, das wäre ein guter Zweck, wenn die den jungen Mann noch delen. Dus ich denke,
Warte mal da. Wollt man da was trinken?
Ja. Aber kann man nicht stehen.
Je Gott, war doch gut. Da.
Stay good, huh?
Gesundheit. Ist auch gut, gell?
Das schmeckt gut.
Da.
Ja, das Gesundheit.
denke, da gibt's vielleicht eine Hochzeit.
Das wäre ein gutes Ding.
Ja, ja. Warte mal, da, ich muss mal erst. Hey Maria, komm mal rein. Hey, du. Was denkst du dann?
Den doe ik zijn. Het is groot en sterk. Den like ik.
Na, da gibt's eine Hochzeit. Aber da, der Wasinger, der muss auch was noch.
Ja, dat deed ik nog aan trinken.
Der ist auch noch was trinken. Ich habe noch eine Frau.
Steek goed, man.
Lieber Gott. Gesundheit.
In Russland, wat ik zei, is,
Russland?
maar gaan we net steken. Ja.
Du kriegst kannst das.
Du machst den alles eine gute Frau. Du bist ein guter Koch.
Now you have some idea of the Friarsmänner. The agreement was sealed with ein Gläschen Schnaps, which you just witnessed. Now undoubtedly there was an occasional refusal where the bride simply would not go along with the matchmaking. When this occurred, it was said, "De hadden korp griet." But this is not the case today. The real Johannes Schumacher and Maria Dechant were actually married in Munjor in 1881.
Na, Schumacher, komm rein.
Ja, kan het de Hochzeit geben?
Das gibt eine Hochzeit. Komm, hey, setz dich mal da hin.
Ja, da. Ja. Die Frau kann sicher bleiben, nein.
Zo, setz dich da. Ich kann dich drüber hinsetzen.
Ja, und es Hochzeit gibt, dann müssen wir schlachten und müssen alles in Ordnung schauen für die Hochzeit.
Aber wir können erst ganz trinken,
Ja, ja, trinken, das ist wahr. Aber die Hochzeit will ja nichts.
Nicht?
Ja.
Was nicht?
Oder gibt ihr auch die Hochzeit was?
Na, ganz gewiss. Ich wollte noch mehr gelesen haben.
In onze familie doen die Hochzeit gewöhnlich nichts immer. Ich trinke aber und zwar, ich trinke so recht.
Aber die Dechant Leute da oben trinken.
Ja, da trinke
Ich denke, ordentliche Arbeit da hier, gell?
Wir müssen jetzt schlachten und mit der Leute inladen und mit der Buchschreiben, wer das kommen soll.
Die hat ja nicht, ja. Die kann schreiben da.
So, at this point now, after both parties agreed to the marriage, the wedding date was set and preparations for the Hochzeit began in earnest. Getting married in those days was no simple task. I might add here that many times the weddings went on for 2 days and maybe even 3 days. The bride had more than one dress. Our bride today will have to get by with just one dress because this is just going to be a one-day affair. The dresses at that time were not white, but they were either dark-colored, and a little bit later they might have been white with pink or blue flowers. But they were not a white dress as we know them today. Now, it involved also several weeks of work and preparation by many friends and relatives. Usually a beef and a hog were butchered, various sausages were prepared, the noodles were made, and the bread, pies, and cakes had to be baked. Until well into the 20th century, no large halls or other facilities which could be utilized for the wedding festivities were available. As a result, the weddings took place in the home, usually the bride's. The house had to be cleaned, the furniture removed, and the rooms made ready for the wedding feast and dancing. The banns of matrimony were announced in church on 3 consecutive Sundays before the wedding. Final preparations were made on Monday after the last announcement, and the wedding took place on Tuesday. Always on Tuesday. Since there were no printed invitation, all guests were invited orally, and the honor for the task fell to 2 Einlader, the baptismal sponsors of the bride and groom. These 2 gentlemen were given a cane and a list of the people to be invited, and at each home they recited to the lady of the house a short verse which they had memorized. Once again, you must remember that most of these guests were right within the village, so it was very possible for these Einlader to walk around and invite everybody. They now go to the home where they will receive from the parents the list of the people that they are to invite.
Ja, men jetzt nicht stress, dass nicht zu viel trinkt, dass sie niemand vergessen. Und die Egerbärl darf sie nicht vergessen und den Bevat Sepp und den Scroll, dass sie nicht vergessen sind. Die sind alle drauf. Die sind alle drauf, dass sie niemand vergessen. Trinkt nicht so viel. Der Groß, der wohnt
Ja, knapp von der alle Leiger dort, den Wartenleiger sind dort. 2 heißen Nord. Ja, das ist gerade auf die Eastside dort, alle.
Der wohnt er, ja.
Now,
Das ist das kleine Häuschen dort, das sind plus 2 Stiefchen.
Die Egerbärl wohnt an die Eck.
now these people are getting their instructions, explicit instructions. At this point, I would like for you again to stretch your imagination. These ladies will represent a home in the village. Each lady represents a home. And as the Einlader went around, they recited to the lady the following verse. Wir kommen nicht gereden, wir kommen doch sicher gefrieden. Braut und Bräutigam, die lasse euch bidden, die lasse euch laden ins Gemein. Ihr sollt ja Hochzeitsgäste sein. 10 Gänse, die müssen dran. 19 Hingel und der alte Giegel, die seien gefittert und fett, wie so ein altes Wagenbrett. Und da kommt ja auch die Katharina Weiß und kocht auch gleich die dicke Gläs. Und die kocht sie nach Belieben und kocht auch gleich die rote Riemen. Himmel, Donner, Wetter, was fällt mir ja ein? Ich habe ja beinahe den Brandwein vergessen. Aber wenn ihr uns unser Stecklein zählt, dann sagen wir euch, wo ihr hingehört. In English that means, we don't come riding, we come walking. The bride and groom, they want to have you invited. You are to be their wedding guests. 10 geese, that's what it will take. 19 chickens and the old rooster have been fed and are fat and round like an old wagon wheel. And then there's also Aunt Catherine. She's going to come and cook the thick dumplings and the red beets. Himmel donner Wetter, I really don't know what an English translation for that is. That was a popular German saying, so I will just simply say Himmel donner Wetter. I just remembered there will also be some pretty good brandy. So if you'll tie a ribbon around our cane, we'll tell you where all of this is to take place. That, ladies and gentlemen, took the place of the printed invitations that young couples send out today. At the conclusion of the recitation, the lady tied a bow to the cane to indicate her acceptance of the invitation. She was then apprised of the time and place of the wedding and was considered duly invited. The host then usually offered the Einlader a drink of kwast, which was one of the fringe benefits of the task. Now, at the end of the day, if everyone offered them a drink of kwast, the Einlader felt like they were ready for a wedding. They then returned the decorated canes to the parents.
Moet ik geloven, je staat nog op die been. Dat is wonderbaar.
Wat is dat net hochzeit? Morgen?
Nou, net zo ver. Net het al in waar.
Als we de groenbaan hier Hannes staat, dan is echt van ezel verhandeld.
Ja, dat is klaar.
Dan moet echt eten.
Dan is wat er echt verhandeld voor ze komt.
Dat was als laatste maar net door, dan bereik ik me gar niet.
Ik had een trouwens koe, maar daar staat de hek met die koe eigenlijk.
Maar ik heb niet iets koe.
Ja, ja. Allemaal, ik kan wel direct op.
Heb je aangenomen?
Nou, maar hè. Met lijst zo.
Dit is maar Joost met dat kleine glas.
Ja, nog klein.
Ja.
Papa kan me niet, kijk.
Oh, thanks. En ik ken jou op die hoogtijd komen met zwaar.
Ja?
Breng de harde waterplat mee.
Dat is
Nou goed.
Het merk helemaal lang, dat is een ganz gemakkelijk.
Ach, bis hier, dan hadden we in kelders en zei je dat zo op.
Oh, dat is hier, ja. Het is klaar rechtbaarheid.
Het waren gisteren, broer, het waren haast gisteren.
Dan was het dan die niks nog gedaan.
Ah, wanneer wordt weer op zo'n tijd?
Hé, verder,
Oh ja,
weet je waar,
is dat eigenlijk morgen? Morgen redden?
Een kleine, dit is zo groot. Ik heb een lange hoogtijd.
Als de vader is, dat is net een beetje hier gedaan.
Ja, dat is ook verrekt voor mij.
Steek voor de hand aan.
Es gibt eine gute Hochzeit. Now, this is at the end of the invitation period.
Macht goed, hoor.
All arrangements have been made. The guests have been invited. And the wedding will take place on Tuesday. Now, some of you might recall the Polterabend, or in Ellis County, better known as Polterabend, the evening before the wedding. Now, this was a party for those who helped prepare the wedding. Incidentally, neither the bride or the groom attended these festivities. I mentioned earlier that some of you also might be looking for the chevalier a little later on. Unfortunately, we couldn't incorporate all of the customs and traditions, and so we had also to omit the chevalier. We are now getting ready for the scene before the church. The bridal party, their parents, and a few close relatives gather at the home of the bride prior to the church ceremony. Oh, there is the usual, getting the dress straightened out, having the veil on properly, everybody ready. But just moments before the walk to the church, a white sheet is spread on the floor, upon which the two young people kneel shortly before the departure for church. We're going to wait here. Everything, not all mother and daughter are just last-minute instructions and so on. It's almost that time. The white sheet has been spread on the floor. The bride and groom are to kneel on it, and they will hold hands. And they are sprinkled with holy water and receive the blessing of their parents, the last honor before they are married.
Hey, der liebe Gott, ich segne. dat er een grote familie is.
Today's wedding couple usually arrives at the church in colorfully decorated cars with tooting horns announcing the arrival of the couple. But in 1881, the trip to the church was made on foot or in a horse-drawn wagon, with the arrival being announced by the blast of a shotgun. We also eliminated the shotgun. Tradition dictated that the bride walk in advance of the groom. However, on the way home following the ceremony, the procedure was reversed and the groom walked first. I will give our couple a little bit of time to go from the home of Carl Dechant to the St. Francis Church at Munjor. The wedding ceremony usually involved all the color and drama of the Roman Catholic Church's nuptial high mass. The ceremony was dignified and impressive. The women wore a head cover and the mass was read in Latin rather than the vernacular as it is today. Vows were exchanged in the presence of family and friends. You might also notice that the priest will have his back to the people for the most part, unlike today. We will now go to the Mass celebration.
In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Kyrie eleison.
Kyrie eleison.
Christe eleison.
Christe eleison.
Kyrie eleison.
Kyrie eleison.
The priest prepares the altar, first genuflecting, then opens the tabernacle door and takes out the ciborium. Then, taking the paten with the host on it, lays it on the corporal. The priest, facing the people with outstretched hands, and then joining them, says the following as the people respond.
Per omnia saecula saeculorum.
Amen.
Dominus vobiscum.
Et cum spiritu tuo.
Susum corda.
The priest's back, now to the people, elevates the host. At this time, the altar boys ring the bells until the host is placed back on the altar. The priest then takes the chalice and elevates it also while the bells are rung. He then takes the host, breaks it in half, and then in half again, consumes a piece along with the wine. He then turns around and gives the bride and groom communion. Now, under all ordinary circumstances here, he would also give communion to the rest of the congregation or the rest of the wedding guests, but we will dispense with that today. And when the priest returns to the altar, he puts away the ciborium into the tabernacle. He now faces the people who stand up. And he says,
Dominus vobiscum, ite missa est, benedicat vos omnipotens Deus Pater et Filius Spiritus Sanctus.
At the conclusion of the ceremony, the very popular and powerful Großer Gott, wir loben dich was sung.
Großer Gott, wir loben dich, Herr, wir preisen deine Stärke, vor dir neigt die Erde sich, und bewundert deine Werke, wie du warst vor aller Zeit, so bleibst du in Ewigkeit. Wie du warst vor aller Zeit, so bleibst du in Ewigkeit. Alles, was dich preisen kann, Cherubim und Seraphinen, stimmen dir ein Loblied an. Alle Engel, die dir dienen, rufen dir stets ohne Ruhe. Heilig, heilig, heilig zu. Rufen dir stets ohne Ruhe. Heilig, heilig, heilig zu.
The end of a beautiful church ceremony. Everybody is now ready to go home and start the afternoon's festivities. However, the departure from church is not without incident. The altar boys presented a problem. They confronted the bridal party at the rear of the church with a rope stretched tightly across the aisle between the last row of pews. Not until the groom and the best man purchased freedom with a traditional cash gratuity were the bride and groom permitted to leave the church and return home. This was one way for the altar boys to earn a little extra money. In some villages, I think in Shenzhen, they were allowed to keep the money for themselves. In Munjor, on the other hand, there was a slight variation there in the custom. I think the money was put into a fund to pay for a picnic at the end of the year for the altar boys. So here we may differ a little bit in tradition. But the altar boys had to be paid before the bride and groom and all the rest of the guests could return home. By now, the house had been scrupulously cleaned and cleared of all furniture except tables and chairs. When the guests arrived, they found the table set with food ready to be served. When they returned from church, they were greeted and welcomed at the door by a family member who offered them a bit of cheer. Some members accepted it graciously and entered the house. Others showed their appreciation for this hospitality by saying, stay a goede hand. This was their way of inviting the greeter to have a drink with them. By the way, it was necessary because of this custom to have 3 or 4 people ready to be at the door and change, to take turns. By now, the house had been scrupulously cleaned and cleared of all furniture except tables and chairs. When the guests arrived, they found the table set with food ready to be served. When they returned from church, they were ready to enter into the day's festivities. Occupying the place of prominence at the table was the bruidtisch with the bridal party, their attendants, their parents, their grandparents, and the baptismal sponsors. Now, would you notice that many guests played a dual role? They were not only guests, but they also served the foods, cleared the table, and washed the dishes. The women, especially the younger women, would come to a wedding with their aprons, prepared to help in the kitchen or dining room. This was just standard procedure. As a wedding guest, you were expected maybe to bake some pies and cakes, and then the day of the wedding you brought your apron and you were ready to help wherever you were needed. Looks like the groom and his attendants and everybody at the bridal table is very occupied with their food.
Mach's ein bisschen besser.
Nein,
das muss besser sein, schon ein bisschen Druckel. Ja, das ist mir gefallen. Ja, danke schön.
Every Hochzeit called for a culprit who crawled under the bruidtisch and removed one of the bride's shoes while the groom and his best man were concentrating on the wedding dinner. At this point, you might have noticed several people engaged the groom and the best man in conversation so that the culprit could get a hold of the shoe. And then the news spread rapidly, had den Schuh gestohlen. Now the bride was hostage to an embarrassing situation. She couldn't dance with only one shoe. Originally, it was the responsibility of the best man to buy the shoe from the culprit. But this could get to be so expensive that a prospective groom had difficulty in getting a best man. And you notice the poor best man over there, he did not have very money, and he offered $1 first, and the culprit was not satisfied. So he had to dig a little deeper, and I'm afraid that if the culprit had not been satisfied, the poor best man would have just simply had to say, look, I'm broke, that's all I've got. And in 1881, that happened quite often. As time went on, this custom was changed, primarily because it would be difficult to get a best man. So as time went on, the custom was changed to auctioning the shoe off to the highest bidder, with each bidder paying only the amount of his bid. The shoe and the money were then given to the bride as a gift. Now, at the conclusion of the meal, the furniture, the tables were cleared and removed, and the room was ready for the dancing, which would continue through the afternoon until supper time. After supper, the tables would be set up again. There would be more food. They had to be removed again. There was more dancing. The next day, the same process, and possibly into the third. But bear with us, don't get shook up. We are not going to go on for 2 days. We were given 2 hours, and that is as long as we're going to go, and maybe not even that. So don't worry about it. Just this afternoon's program. But we do want to tell you that this could have gone on for 3 days. As a matter of fact, just to interject a little bit here, while our group is preparing, I did serve as a bridesmaid for a wedding that went on for 2 days. I served as a bridesmaid on a number of occasions. Most of them were just one-day affairs, but this particular one I will never forget was a 2-day affair. At this time also, the band gets ready for the festivities. They, of course, are a very important part of the afternoon's program. So here we have our band also getting ready. Again, bear with us, stretch your imagination. Because of the modern equipment today, we needed to set up the band equipment earlier in the day so that we would not waste any time. But in the early days, it was usually a fiddle, a dulcimer, and maybe a bass fiddle. Today the instruments have changed a little bit, but those that are familiar with the old time music will find that the music has not changed. They are going to play, our band here today will play music as you would have heard it in the late 1800s, early 1900s. As I say, everybody helps, and you notice with the people here, it doesn't take them very long to clear the area, to clear the house, to clear the room. The band is set up, and I think we are ready to proceed with the festivities. The dancing and the afternoon activities were preceded by traditional ceremonial observances. And the first one, the parents and the guests surround the young couple in front of the band and sing the Brautlied, which is a toast to the bride. Now the group will sing it in German, and then after they have completed their singing, I will again give you a quick English translation for those of you that are unfamiliar with it.
Sing mit fröhlicher Geliebte, freu dich auch mit deiner Braut, die dir heute Gottes Liebe zur Gehilfe anvertraut, dass sie dich in Angst und Fragen preisen soll in dieser Welt und ich will mit dir tragen, welche ihre schwerlich fällt. Reitet freilich zum Altar, welche Gott jedem Zukunft, dessen Dienst viele Jahre, euch gesund erhalten kann. Bittet Jesum und den Segen, ladet ihn zur Hochzeit ein, denn daran ist es gelegen, wenn ihr wollt glücklich sein. Reicht einander Hand und Herzen, freilich ohne Heuchelei. Trachtet das in Treu und Schmerzen, eure Treue standhaft sein. Immer soll die Liebe brennen, nach dem göttlichen Gebot. Niemand soll die Ehe trennen, niemand als ein kleiner Tod.
The English translation, for those who did not understand, it says, sing with joyful exultation, happy bridegroom with your bride, whom today God's loving kindness placed as helpmate at your side, that in all your trials and struggles she may your comfort be, and in patience share your burden, which alone you could not bear. Prayerfully approach the altar, reverently adore your God, whose kind providence and goodness can give health for many years. Beg your Savior for his blessing, and him as wedding guest invite, for good luck and future progress ever on it do rely. Extend each other hand and heart, faithfully without deceit. Endeavor that in joy and sorrow your loyalty will always be. Love will burn forever in you after the divine command. Nobody shall ever part this union. Only death alone shall part it. Now, this beautiful song was followed by yet another tradition, Die Brautreihe. As the band played the wedding march, the bridal couple walked slowly around the room, and the guests pin money to their clothes as their gift. And let's see how this might have worked. Okay, band. The festivities moved into high gear. The newlyweds danced the first number, a waltz alone. So we'll give them the spotlight. The band will play a waltz just for the newlyweds.
Hey!
With the attendants to a number with a slightly increased tempo, the Hochzeit. For our program, however, we're going to have all of the guests join in, not just the attendants and the bride and groom, but we'll have a Hochzeit and have everybody join, all the wedding guests join in. Germans very well. I don't know whether any of you noticed in the previous scenes, Grossfather was limping a little bit, moving kind of slowly. But did you notice that on the dance floor? No, I have seen that happen before. When it comes to working or doing anything else, we got arthritis and rheumatism and we can't move too well. But get a Hochzeit and we don't notice that anymore. Our next dance is a Schadisch, and it requires almost as much energy as a Hochzeit. I'd also like to point out to you that unlike the dances today, the couples, man and wife, very seldom dance with each other. It was customary for them to dance the first dance and Home Sweet Home, but in between with everybody else. And they had better dance with the mother-in-law and the sister-in-law and the neighbor and whoever else was down the line as far as priority was concerned. So they danced with each other. And of course, not always everybody danced. But for this one now, we will see what they do with the Schadisch. The waltz was a favorite number, and the first waltz we played, only the bride and groom were allowed to dance, and I know that the other guests would like to dance a waltz, so let's play one more waltz for all of the guests to dance to. like fast numbers. I like the Hochzeit. Let's have one more snappy nut Hochzeit. Now, the musicians for these early weddings were not hired for a predetermined amount of money like they are today. And so they relied on gifts from the dancers. And in those days, it was not $5 and $10 and $20 bills, but probably nickels and dimes and quarters. And thus, the better the dancers paid, the better the band played. And in this case, the band simply let the dancers know that unless they paid up and shelled out with a couple of pennies, they were not going to continue. Another one of these not so subtle ways of letting them know what they wanted. Next number, the next dance we would like to show you is one called Put Your Little Foot. And it, like the Schottish, can almost take its place among the lost and forgotten wedding traditions of the Volga Germans. Singing played a very important role in the lives of the Volga Germans, and weddings always provided an excellent opportunity to sing. Talent, or the ability to sing, was not nearly as important as the desire. One very popular song that was generally sung was Wir sitzen so freilich beisammen. It dates back to the time of the Napoleonic Wars and is so popular that it is still being sung by the Volga Germans coming out of Russia today. Last October, about a year ago, I was in Russia or in Germany at a convention of Volga Germans, and I had taken a tape recording of Wir sitzen so fröhlich beisammen along as we sing it here, and the people just rose up and started singing along. That is a very popular song. It tells about the peace and serenity in Germany and how the people live with love for one another. It says, how serene life is if only it could stay this way forever. But the war destroys the peace and no one will be spared. When the French came, we Germans were not afraid. We stood firm as a stone wall and we did not budge one step. Then Napoleon is told that had he only stayed out of Germany, he would still be wearing the nicest crown. So, wir sitzen so fröhlich beisammen.
Wir sitzen so fröhlich beisammen und wir haben uns einander so lieb. Wir heilen uns einander das Leben, wenn es noch immer so blieb. Wir heilen uns einander das Leben, wenn es noch immer so blieb. Wie kann es noch immer so bleiben, hier unter dem Wechsel des Monds? Der Krieg muss den Frieden vertreiben, im Krieg wird ja keiner nicht verschont. Der Krieg muss den Frieden vertreiben, im Krieg wird ja keiner nicht verschont. Da kamen die stolzen Franzosen, wir Deutschen, wir fürchten uns nicht. Wir stehen so fest wie die Mauern, wir weichen und machen keinen Schritt. Wir stehen so fest wie die Mauern, wir weichen und machen keinen Schritt. Napoleon durchschoss Gestelle, wie stehst du so fest auf deinem Thron? Wärst du aus Deutschland geblieben, so hättest du die allerschönste Krone. Wärst du aus Deutschland geblieben, so hättest du die allerschönste Krone.
Another very popular song, and this is a fun song, was the Alte Schnapswalzer. And it, with its fast tempo and joyous melodies, was a very popular wedding song. It depicts two fellas who like to have fun. First, they, would you guess, drink a little? Then they want to dance a little. And they want to dance quite a bit, as a matter of fact. And they tire themselves out completely. And then they want to go home and cover up with a warm quilt. So at this point, der Alte Schnapswalzer.
Die junge Alte Schnapswalzer, wir denken so gern eins trinken. Die junge Alte Schnapswalzer, wir denken so gern eins trinken. Aus ein Schnaps vor
Schnapsbalzer, wir den so gern einst tanzen. Gegen der alte Schnapsbalzer, wir den so gern einst tanzen. Auf ein schönes Blättchen mit so schönes Mädchen, heiße, Obsa, uns geht's lustig zu. Auf ein schönes Blättchen mit so schönes Mädchen, heiße, Obsa, uns geht's lustig zu. Ich in der alte Schnapsbalzer, wir den so gern einschlafen. Ich in der alte Schnapsbalzer, wir den so gern einschlafen. Auf ein schönes Bettchen und ein warmes Deckchen, heiße, Obsa, uns geht's lustig zu. Auf ein schönes Bettchen und ein warmes Deckchen, heiße, Obsa, uns geht's lustig zu.
One more very popular song and very, very appropriate song at a wedding was Schön ist die Jugend. It tells about the beauty of youth and how once it is lost, will never return. Schön ist die Jugend.
Ich lieb ein Mädchen von 18 Jahren, ich lieb ein Mädchen wunderschön, drum sag ich noch einmal, schön sind die jungen Jahre, schön ist die Jugend, sie kommt nicht mehr. Drum sag ich noch einmal, schön ist die Jugend, ja, schön ist die Jugend, sie kommt nicht mehr. Ich sah ein Weinstock und der trägt Trauben, aus diesen Trauben floss der Wein. Drum sag ich noch einmal, schön ist die Jugend, ja, schön ist die Jugend, sie kommt nicht mehr. Drum sag ich noch einmal, schön ist die Jugend, ja, schön ist die Jugend, sie kommt nicht mehr.
At today's wedding, the cake is is served as dessert following the meal. But in 1881, it was cut into bite-sized pieces, put into a large container, and served to the wedding guests by the bride and groom. We will take several minutes for the bride and groom to serve their cake to the wedding guests. I am sure that many of you sitting in the audience remember when you maybe did this. Is that familiar, people? Did any of you do this? Yes. So you know what I am talking about. Germans were extremely difficult, and using contemporary language, stressful. A wedding, however, provided them with the opportunity to forget their problems, at least for the moment, and enjoy themselves. Some of their dances, like the descendants, were more a fun dance, or more of an activity than a dance. Now, with this dance, the couples form two lines with the men on one side and the women on the other. The band will play a waltz, and the first couple dances, then stops, and to a faster tempo starts the chase. The object is for the man to chase his partner until he catches her. Of course, in the meantime, everyone makes this as difficult as possible. Now, this dance really should continue until each couple has had the opportunity to waltz. But that requires more time than we have, so we will do it only several times to give you an idea of how this dance really operates as a fun and activity dance, rather than really as a dance. So, ladies and gentlemen, the descendants. We saw the dance here as it was performed with the man chasing the lady. But with the roles reversed, it was the lady who chased her partner. Let's take a look at that. You can't always depend on everybody playing this game fairly. For some of the men who seem to have two left feet on the dance floor, the solo table was of much more interest and importance in the music. And of course that always left some of the women to dance by themselves or with each other. Now you notice here we have at one end of our room a table that has been set up. Those of you that attended old-fashioned weddings, you know again what we are talking about. There were always these people that after the first dance and up to the last one, they would find the solo table. And we have a foursome over here, including Grossfather. He's playing solo. Maybe his rheumatism has gotten the best of him now. But that doesn't bother the rest of the people. They go right on dancing, and the band, I think, is ready to play another Hochzeit, maybe. So let the solo players sit over there and play their game. Occasionally, there were slight disagreements about cheating. The broom dance was another fun dance. This is a couple dance with one extra person who dances with the broom until the music stops. The broom is then dropped and the person races to grab a partner. The broom dance. Cheating. Now, sometimes if a woman was left out, or a man, whatever the case may be, the next time around, maybe she would grab a woman and all of a sudden there would be an extra man left out. And I think that's what Verlene was trying to prove it. Yes. Okay, so much for the broom dance. The Flying Dutchman was unknown by the early settlers, but it has become very popular and is requested at most weddings today. So we will do a little bit of the Flying Dutchman. Sometime throughout the evening for the bologna sandwiches and the dill pickles to be passed around. Now, it's been a long time since supper, or that's usually when they pass them around, is after supper during the evening dance. And remember now, this could go on until 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And it has been quite some time since supper, so the bologna sandwiches are being passed around and the dill pickles, and anybody that is hungry enough will take one. However, it does not stop the musicians from playing, nor does it stop the dancers from cutting a rug out there on the floor. The next number is a waltz medley, which is a favorite of the band that is playing today. So we will have a waltz medley while the bologna sandwiches and the dill pickles are being passed around. All good things must come to an end, even the wedding. And finally, it is time for Home Sweet Home. Many of the early day weddings lasted 2 days and occasionally 3, as I've mentioned before. But for some guests, it was never quite long enough. And they had to extend it a little bit by singing one more song. Das Gläslein, das muss wandern.
Das Gläslein, das muss wandern, Vögel, komm bei mir auf. Von einem bis zum anderen, Vögel, komm bei mir auf. I saw Vögel, Vögel, hopsasa, Vögel, komm bei mir auf. I saw Vögel, Gläslein muss sein Recht geschehen, Vögel, komm bei mir raus. Was oben ist, muss unten stehen, Vögel, komm bei mir raus. I saw Vögel, hopsasa, Vögel, komm bei mir raus. I saw Vögel, hopsasa, Vögel, komm bei mir raus.
The last song that was generally sung, and with which we will conclude our program, except for a few acknowledgments and introductions, is a song which exemplifies the feeling of many guests at the end of a wedding. Their heads hurt because they had tipped the bottle once too often. Their stomachs ached because they couldn't resist the good food, and their feet were sore because they had danced too much. Schöne gute Nacht.
Schöne gute Nacht, wenn ich heim so geh, tut mir meinen Kopf so weh. Meinen Kopf, der tut mir weh. Schöne gute Nacht, wenn ich heim so geh. Meinen Kopf, der tut mir weh. Schöne gute Nacht, wenn ich heim so geh. Schöne gute Nacht, wenn ich heim so geh. Tut mir meinen Leib so weh, meinen Leib, der tut mir weh. Schöne gute Nacht, wenn ich heim so geh. Meinen Leib, der tut mir weh. Schöne gute Nacht, wenn ich heim so geh. Schöne gute Nacht, wenn ich heim so geh. Tut mir meinen Fies so weh, meinen Fies, die tun mir weh. Schöne gute Nacht, wenn ich heim so geh. Meinen Fies, die tun mir weh. Schöne gute Nacht, wenn ich heim so geh.
Hope you enjoyed our program. Before I make the introductions, at the risk of omitting somebody or leaving somebody out, I'm going to have to do it anyway. There are a number of acknowledgments that I would like to make. First of all, putting this program on for you today was fun, but it was also a lot of work and required a great deal of time, and on the part of some people, some sacrifice. I do want to mention what most of the people did, because I really appreciate their support. First of all, I want to thank publicly the members of the cast, because they have done an excellent job of supporting me. Thank you. are the work of Tony Sramek and Phyllis Schmidt. Let me tell you a little bit something about that. First of all, I was a little bit sad to hear just now that Tony, after his part of the program, came down with the flu, and he has been in the room just pretty ill. So unfortunately, Tony can't be here for the introductions. But he ran off all the programs, and Phyllis Schmidt typed every one of them on the front side individually. Give them a great big hand for the program. The songs were the responsibility of Florence Weigel. Getting the vestments and setting up the altar and doing the Mass was the responsibility of Kevin Rupp. The properties that you see over here were the help, or came through the help of many people. Rupert Pfannenstiel hauled in the table and a number of other things. Celly Schumacher, the washstand. Delores Pfannenstiel fixed the bologna sandwiches, and I'm sure brought other things. Tony was responsible for the cake also. Maria and Befort, the altar, or the tablecloth. There were several other people, I think Verlene, that brought some tablecloths. Larry Werth, of course, it was his washstand. Did I say Celly and the washstand? Yes. Chairs, all right, my mistake. Celly brought the chairs, and Larry Werth the washstand. Carol Katz was in charge of the properties. I didn't even really check everything today, but all of these people, I think, did a really tremendously good job in supporting me. I might also add that for William and Rose from Wichita, it meant one trip up here special for rehearsal, and then another special trip up here to take part in the program. Now I would like to introduce the participants to you. I know they are all listed on your program, but there are a few other things I would like to say. First of all, the band. I might also say that Edward was responsible for setting up the PA system. He was responsible for having the mic here for us, and also for the band. And by the way, if you enjoyed this afternoon's music, come back tonight, because this is the band that will play for the dance this evening. At the accordion is Earl Befort. At the keyboard, one of the very best, Rhonda Tepfer. And playing the guitar is Edward Pfeiffer. The altar boys are Shawn and Donovan Richmeier. The priest, Kevin Rupp. The guests, Benny Lesh. Maria and Johannes. Carol Katz. Larry and Lorene Werth, and Larry was an Einlader. Virgil and Delores Pfannenstiel, and Virgil was an Einlader. Paul and Emmy Werth, and Paul was a Freiersmann. William and Rose Wasinger, and William was a Freiersmann. Lawrence and Elizabeth Weigel, the groom's parents. Celly and Verlene Schumacher, the bride's parents. Rupert Pfannenstiel, Großvater. Phyllis Schmidt, Großmutter. Tony Sramek, the groomsman. Unfortunately, he is ill. Jennifer Wahlmeier, the bridesmaid. And our bride and groom, none other than Jerry and Judy Braun. I'd like for the bride and groom to step out a little bit farther, as well as William and Celly. Over here at the table, get yourself over here. Over here at the table is a wedding picture of Johannes, Schumacher, and Maria Dechant. That is their wedding picture. And there are 4 generations of weddings on each side. Celly is the great-grandson of Johannes and Maria, and William is also a great-grandson of Johannes and Maria. And our wedding pictures, 4 generations, are over there on the table. Tony Sramek is a great-great-nephew of Johannes Schumacher. So we have 3 members of the cast that are related to the bride and groom, whose wedding we celebrated today. Also, the bride and the groom are wearing the veil and the streiche of their grandparents. And their wedding picture is over there also. I think it is a great honor for them to perform today wearing the veil and the streiche of their grandparents. And also, there were some of the ladies, Elizabeth Weigel, who was wearing a headscarf today that is 100 years old. And I believe, Rose, were you wearing Mary Ann's?
Yes.
Okay, Mary Ann has one that belonged to her grandmother.
My mother's mother.
Okay, so her grandmother. I thank you, Shane, and feel good.
If I might make one comment, a quick comment. We planned to get something to show our appreciation to Leona. And Leona, we were thinking about a new car. As you could tell, we had trouble coming up with enough money for the band to play. So you'll have to settle for flowers instead. We do appreciate it. Thanks a lot.